Hey, welcome to my channel here at that Kilted Guy videos, and today what I'm going to teach you is how to properly tape an inside angle when you're doing drywall, when you're doing taping and finishing, and we're going to show you that coming up right after this. And we're back now. What we're going to do is show you how to tape an angle, as I mentioned, and it's not really that hard, so this is one of the easier videos. And I also want to make sure I thank everybody for stopping by. I really appreciate you, and if you got a minute, at the end of the video there'll be a link to you can click on it and subscribe, or just look down in the comments. There's a subscribe link down there, as well as a bunch of other good information. So if you're going to tape an inside angle, this is just a little mock-up of an inside angle I've made so I can show you here in my studio how to tape this. Now, there's a couple things you want to do to prep for this. One is make sure all your screws are set properly, because if they're sticking out and you put tape over them, you kind of got a difficulty trying to drive that screw now because you got tape over it. It can be fixed though, and you're going to need a couple things. You're going to need a way to tape it, and I do recommend paper tape on these inside angles. The paper tape just works better. If you watch the other part of the video, I used a fiber tape, and you can also use mesh tape to tape things. So there's three common types of tape. There's the paper tape, fiber fuse they call it, and the mesh tape. But for inside angles, this is the only thing I recommend, because the other two just don't really have the right strength, or they tear too easy. The fiber fuse I think is a good product, but it tears really easy at the touch of a knife. So it works great on flats and patches and such, but for this, let's stick to this. Now, probably the first thing you want to do, we're going to do it in this order. You can do it and put the mud on first, or either way. Just measure out how much you need. And if you're doing a full 8-foot type wall, you can just start at the top, go to the bottom, tear off a little bit of extra. You always want to have a little extra rather than come up short. And then, so you imagine this is it. We're just going to tear it off and say about that much. Now there are tape dispensers. If you're taping very much, you can either use a banjo, which I have showed you in other videos, but it looks like this in this illustration here. And that works great. It doesn't crease it into the corner, but you can push it in manually. The pro tapers, like when I used to do new construction, which I did for about 15 years, we used what's called a bazooka. Now you probably don't want to go buy that, because last I looked it was close to $2,000, but it's a great tool. Looks kind of like this picture here, and it really gets with it when you're trying to tape a whole lot in a hurry. But if you're taping just a little bit, you can do it just manual like this. There's also a holder that will hold the roll of tape on the side. You can feed it out. I do have one of those. I just didn't break it out for this little bitty demonstration. And the final way, let's see, there's the banjo, the bazooka, and just the hand method we're doing here. So if you look at the tape up close, see if we can illustrate this in this light. You can see the crease down the middle. This is pre-creased paper tape. That's another advantage to it. So once you get it to the right length, just crease it down that crease. And sometime it'll wander off, but you can just kind of bring it back. So you get your crease in about a 90-degree angle for the, it doesn't have to be perfect, you're just getting it ready for here. Then all you got to do, kind of like taping the flats, is you put plenty of mud on here. I'm doing this where I can barely see what I'm doing, trying to show you guys, but let's see. Now, see how I left it a little bit dry right through here? Don't do that. If you see spots like that, put a little extra on. And you can also, you can load your knife up where you start out like that. This is some pretty thin mud here, so hopefully I don't drip, but you can load it up and just pull it up like this. So however you get it on, get a nice solid coat on, just like for the flats, make sure that you don't dig out the other side when you're doing this. So let me point this out right now. If you look at this knife, this corner right here forms a 90, and it's that way on purpose. So you have to put the knife into the corner at the right angle. You can put it like this and you'll do no harm to the other side. Put it a little bit too far that way, and see how I just dug out on that side. You don't want to dig that side out like that. So get it back. So keep your knife squared up, but just slightly tilted this way so that you're not digging out. And then just place the paper tape in here, kind of push it into the mud, and a lot like the flats, just wipe it with your knife at about an angle. Let's see if I can even illustrate this on here. It's going to be kind of hard to see on the video, but I think you can see that. So you don't want to lay it down too much, or you might not wipe out enough, and you definitely don't want to stand it up too much. So you lay it down, you put medium pressure. Notice I can even do it with just these few fingers. It doesn't take a ton of pressure here. And when you get to the bottom, if you've got a floor down here, sometime you'll start from the top most of the time because you're standing up, and you wipe down and you get down here and you can't go any further. You can kind of push it on through like this. Just make sure you don't push too hard because it's forcing you to stand your knife up to do that. Or you can just turn your knife around, lay it down a little extra because that puts less pressure on this tape right here, and wipe it down. Because if you don't, you can see how I just wrinkled it. It'll wrinkle up on you. So when you're doing that bottom, that's when you do need to lay it down a little extra and just go over a little more until you feel like you've wiped out the proper amount of mud. So now when you're wiping it, now you've got paper tape in there. It doesn't hurt to get your knife a little bit that way. It's not going to hurt this time. You don't have to get anything perfect here, like that little line, or that you'll often have a ridge right down the tape as you wipe it. Don't worry about it. You're going to come back and next you're going to coat it. Now normally I would let this completely dry, so we're going to dry it up a bit, and then I'm going to show you how to coat it. We're going to come back to that right after this. Okay, we've let the angles dry overnight, so you can see in the close-up here that they're good and dry. And now we're ready to coat it. What I've got here is my usual. I use this for about everything. It's called +3. It's USG +3, as you'll see in this picture right here. And this is what I use to, you can do taping with this and pretty much everything because it is an all-purpose. Now if you're going to tape a lot, I use the green label not +3, but the green label all-purpose, as you'll see in this picture, because it actually is a little bit better. It's got a little better adhesion, so it's a little bit better for taping a lot of stuff. But anyway, right now we're ready to coat. So let's talk about this. You can see in this close-up here that it has shrunk back a little bit, and that's normal. And what you want to do is look over your angles that you've taped, and if you see any high edges or any drips of mud or anything that's just a rough spot, simply take your sponge, hit it a little bit. That's really about all you would want to do on this one, for example. So don't get carried away. You're not trying to make it pretty with that sanding sponge, you're just knocking off the high spots. Now with angles, there's a couple ways to coat this. The way I usually do it is I will coat one side at a time, and the reason is if you coat this side and then you come back and coat this side, you tend to dig out that middle section right through there, and so then you got to try and fix that. So I usually, if I'm not in a rush, I coat one side, let it thoroughly dry, and then coat the other. So I'm going to show you how we coat that here. And it's always, this is an awkward angle for me because I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera, but I can figure it out here. So all you do is get a good load of mud on here. Make sure this is showing in the camera. And I usually load up my mud on my knife a certain way. I don't just get a gob out of there. It's coming off the edges and all. So what I usually do is I get it out and then I cut it off on my pan. And you can see in this close-up here that it's just got cleaner corners. It's easier to work with. To me, it's not so messy. All right, I guess I should actually talk about one other thing, how thick the mud should be, because the mud, when it comes out of the box, can be really thick or it can be medium thin. So you may have to adjust it with a mixing paddle, like the one in this picture here. We buy our stuff in boxes and then put it in the buckets because it's way cheaper. But even if you buy it in a bucket, you'll want to check it. And it's really hard to tell you how thin it is, but you can see here if I hold this, it's not absolutely running off my knife. So it's not real thin, but it is been thinned down a little bit. So you kind of have to use what feels good to you, but if you're doing this and it's just running off your knife, you've got it way too thin. So work down to the thinness and get it where it's easy to control on your knife. And then just start your knife, video right? Start your knife at an angle like this, and as you go up, you're slowly leaning it over like that. Just like coating all the other joints. I've got videos showing you how to coat butt joints and all the recessed joints and things like that. It's the same basic technique to spread the mud. So once you get that on there, you put a good solid coat on. You want that tape to be pretty much completely gone. You don't want to see tape showing through the mud. Then you feather that edge, and I've covered this in my videos before, but to feather an edge, you tilt your knife at an angle, bend that blade a little bit, and just go down the side, and it just leaves you a nice, clean, feathered edge. And then lay your knife over at about, it's not quite a 45, just don't get it too flat to the surface or you probably end up dragging your knuckle through it like that. And don't stand it up too much or you're gonna do this. You're gonna take it all back off. So put it on here at an angle like this, square your knife up into the corner, and I showed you this when we taped it. That's got that 90-degree corner. So you square your knife up into the corner and just put medium light pressure on it and go down. And if you need to go over it again, you can. I usually just go over it once, but it's always a lot harder for me to do this in slow motion. Somebody made that comment on one of my videos, and it really is. I go fast when I do it. It's hard for me to do it in slow motion. So we'll do it just one more time to show you. Put it on. Again, this is hard to stay out of the camera and do this. Feather it and wipe it. And you see when I do it quick like that, it just comes out nice and smooth. Now you would let that dry overnight, but if you're in a hurry, you could try and do this other side at the same time. But you see what I did right there? I leaned it over a little bit, dug out that side, so now I got to put some back, and I want to pull my knife away a little bit so that square edge doesn't get into the other mud. Feather both of them and wipe them again, but again this time tilt your knife away so that you're not messing up the other one quite as much. But you see how it left that edge in there, that little groove I mean. Now you could come back and sand that lightly and caulk it and it would be okay. So kind of got to decide to you if you want to do it like that. And then I'm going to show you one other method. Okay, now I'm going to show you another method, because I'm sure if you're out there in the stores looking at tools, you're going to find this two-sided angle tool, and I've played with them a lot and they can do decent sometimes. So if you're going to use that, what you do is first put the mud in the angle on both sides. And then I'd still go ahead and feather it. And then you just use this to run up through the angle. But you see the problem I have is I usually end up leaving this edge on this outside. It's really hard to coat with this tool. But you could go like that, feather this edge again, feather this one, and leave it right there. Because what you can do next once it dries is come back and just sand that real lightly and it will go away really easy. And now you don't have the middle part to deal with. Now one more thing about this tool is the pressure is going to be a little bit different. You really kind of got to play with it, but you have to stand it up a little bit to get these corners out here. That helps not leave the edge, but at the same time you got to push it hard enough to, let's see, I'm probably out of camera any. So with this tool, when you put it into the angle, if you can see on the camera, it's not touching right here, but it's touching on both sides. It's actually made to be a little bit splayed. So you actually have to push it into the angle hard enough to get this point all the way in there, and then go down and keep it leaned over enough that you don't take out so much mud. So it is totally different feel than the single bladed knife, but you just have to push it hard enough to get this point in right here and these edges still touching. It's just another option if you have this tool or want to play with it. I'd say this is better for taping, but you guys can play with it because drywall is a lot about feel. You have to use the tools and the methods that feel comfortable to you. So anyway, that's really basically all there is to it. One good solid coat of mud like this is all you need on the angles, and it's going to look fine. It's a little different than coating the flats. So play around with that and see how that works for you, and leave me a comment in the comments below. Tell me how it worked for you, which method worked for you, and how hard it was for you. Until then, we're going to catch you on the next video, and I thank you for stopping by. Be sure and check that link at the end. It's where you can subscribe, and there's more videos, links to watch. There's also links in the description below. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.